Hi, my name is Olivia Carter. I'm 27, and I've always considered myself responsible, sometimes maybe too responsible. I work as a graphic designer in Denver, I pay my bills on time, and I try to keep my life in order. But over the past few months, I've realized that being responsible doesn't mean everyone around you respects your boundaries. It all came crashing down last week. I opened my mailbox to find a notice from my health insurance provider. My jaw dropped. Apparently, my medical insurance had been used, not by me but by my mom, Karen Carter. She had racked up several appointments and even a minor procedure without telling me. The worst part? It was my plan, the one I worked so hard to maintain, and suddenly I was at risk of losing coverage because of her reckless use. I confronted her immediately, my voice shaking, trying to understand why she would do this. Karen just shrugged and said, "It's fine, Olivia. Don't worry about it." But I couldn't stop worrying. I felt betrayed, used, and completely invisible. This wasn't the first time she'd crossed lines, but it was the moment I realized maybe I couldn't just brush it off anymore. I sat in my apartment, staring at the notice, feeling a mix of anger, disappointment, and heartbreak. This was my breaking point. I had to figure out what I was going to do next, because I couldn't let anyone, especially my own mother, take advantage of me again. Growing up, my life always revolved around my mom, Karen, and her expectations. My dad, Thomas Carter, was kind but distant, always too busy with work to notice the small ways Karen controlled everything at home. I had an older brother, Ethan, who somehow seemed to do no wrong. He got all the praise, the attention, the freedom I longed for. And me? I was invisible, just the helpful one, the one who had to clean up after everyone, fix their mistakes, and suppress my own needs. Karen had this way of making me feel guilty for even wanting attention. If I got sick as a child, she'd sigh and say, "You're fine, Olivia. Stop exaggerating." But if Ethan complained, she'd rush to his side with ice packs and warm soup. She played favorites openly, and I learned early that my feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. School was my escape. I was a good student, but even my achievements at times were met with cold acknowledgement. "That's nice, Olivia," Karen would say, her tone clipped, never with warmth. I began to internalize that my worth depended on usefulness, not on being loved. Even as a teenager, I'd notice her small betrayals, using my savings for her own whims, borrowing my things without asking, and, as it turns out, even exploiting my medical care when I was under her plan. I thought family meant unconditional love, but with Karen, love always came with strings attached, and I was beginning to feel like I was just a resource to her, not a daughter. Those patterns stuck with me, and now, looking back, I can see how this latest incident with my insurance was not an isolated betrayal. It was part of a lifetime of being undervalued and taken advantage of. After college, I moved into my own apartment in Denver, determined to create a life where I was independent and in control. I worked long hours as a graphic designer, often staying late to meet deadlines, and I meticulously managed my finances, partly because of my past experiences and partly because I wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own. Despite building this life, I still tried to help my family whenever they asked. I paid for some of Ethan's unexpected expenses, helped my dad with tech issues, and even tried to subtly support my mom when I noticed her struggling with health concerns. I never expected lavish thanks, just honesty and respect. But Karen's pattern of exploitation continued, creeping into every area of my life. It started with small things. She'd borrow money without asking, schedule appointments on my insurance without telling me, and dismiss any concerns I voiced. Each time, I rationalized it. She's my mom. Maybe she really needed it, I'd think. But the tension kept building. My credit card had mysteriously high charges, my insurance claims were maxing out, and the anxiety of not knowing if I'd be left without coverage gnawed at me constantly. I even confided in Ethan once, hoping for support. He shrugged, saying, "Mom's always like that, Liv. Just let it go." That silence hit harder than any argument. It was the realization that no matter how responsible or giving I was, I could never meet the expectations or moral code of my family. My sacrifices, my time, my money, my emotional labor were invisible and unappreciated. The crescendo of stress came the night I received the insurance notice. That single moment crystallized everything: years of overlooked boundaries, unacknowledged sacrifices, and quiet manipulation. I knew I couldn't continue like this, living in a constant state of compromise and guilt. Something had to change, and it had to be me taking control of my life. The breaking point came a few days after I discovered the insurance misuse. I confronted Karen again, this time with all the facts laid out: claim numbers, dates, and the financial risk she had put me in. I expected anger, maybe even an apology. What I got instead was dismissal. "You're overreacting, Olivia. It's not a big deal. I needed it, and you should be glad I'm taking care of myself," she said, her voice calm, almost patronizing. I felt my chest tighten, disbelief and rage colliding. I glanced at Ethan, hoping he would step in or defend me. He just looked away, pretending to scroll through his phone. My dad remained in the background, silent as usual. The weight of isolation hit me like a physical blow. For the first time, I realized that no one would fight for me. Not my mom, not my dad, not even my brother. I felt small, powerless, and utterly betrayed. Tears blurred my vision as I grabbed my coat and walked to the door. Before leaving, I paused, took a deep breath, and slammed it behind me. That slam wasn't just the sound of a door closing. It was the sound of me finally acknowledging that I had to step away to survive. I walked into the night with a mix of fear and resolve. I didn't know exactly what my next step would be, but I knew one thing: I couldn't stay in a place where I was consistently devalued and exploited. After that night, I made a decision I never thought I would. I needed to vanish from the life that had been quietly suffocating me. I began by downsizing my apartment, selling belongings that tied me to memories of betrayal and neglect. I left behind the furniture, the decor, even the sentimental items that once seemed so important. Each item sold or donated felt like shedding a layer of the past. I quit my job at the design firm. It was scary to give up stability, but I realized that part of my anxiety stemmed from constantly feeling overextended and responsible for everyone else's needs. I moved to Portland, a city where no one knew my family, where I could rebuild my identity from scratch. I found a small freelance graphic design gig that allowed me flexibility and control, and slowly began forming new connections with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. The first few weeks were difficult. Loneliness and doubt crept in, whispering that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe I had made a mistake. But every time I felt that fear, I reminded myself of the notices, the dismissals, the countless times my boundaries had been ignored. I began journaling, taking long walks, and investing in hobbies I had neglected: painting, yoga, and volunteering at a local animal shelter. With every small achievement, my confidence returned. I discovered that independence wasn't just about money or moving away. It was about reclaiming my voice, my health, and my right to be respected. For the first time in my adult life, I felt peace. I wasn't running away. I was building something better for myself. I was finally free to live on my own terms. A few months into my new life in Portland, I started hearing from my old world. Karen called occasionally, her voice soft, trying to sound apologetic, but it was laced with subtle guilt-tripping. "Olivia, I'm not feeling well. Maybe you should come home for a few days," she'd say, as if my presence could erase her past mistakes. Ethan sent messages too, half-hearted apologies mixed with blame. "I wish you'd understand Mom's side, it's complicated." I realized they were attempting to pull me back into the same toxic cycle, hoping I'd surrender my independence for the sake of family appearances. Then, Karen escalated her manipulations. She sent emails claiming she had medical emergencies, attached vague hospital bills, and subtly reminded me that I had family responsibilities. I felt the old guilt creeping in, the same guilt that had kept me compliant for years. But this time was different. I reminded myself of every betrayal, every ignored boundary, every sacrifice that went unacknowledged. I wasn't naive anymore. I had rebuilt my life, my peace, and my self-worth. Their attempts to pull me back only strengthened my resolve. I wrote polite but firm messages. "I'm happy with my life here, and I need to focus on my own well-being." I refused to let manipulation dictate my choices. For the first time, I realized that distance wasn't just physical, it was emotional armor. I was stronger, wiser, and no longer available to be exploited. Looking back now, I understand that leaving wasn't an act of rebellion or punishment, it was an act of survival. I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't force my family to respect my boundaries. But I could choose myself, my health, and my peace. In Portland, I've built a life where I am seen and valued. I have friends who support me, colleagues who appreciate my work, and a home where my choices are respected. I've learned that family is not just defined by blood, it's defined by love, respect, and mutual care. The biggest lesson I've learned is simple but powerful. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Walking away from toxic patterns doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you finally care about yourself enough to set limits. If there's one thing I want others to take away from my story, it's this. Protect your boundaries, honor your worth, and never let anyone make you feel invisible. Life is too short to live for people who exploit your kindness. Choosing yourself isn't just survival, it's liberation.